looking for the objectives, the concepts, the groups, the universal laws, the values, proofs, and commands. And through journeying through these elements of study, then you can draw for yourself a composite perspective. So I hope that this is anyway. Must be a way of yeah, here we go. So basically what you need to do is to draw a composite perspective. In Arabic, that would be what you could call in the language of the Usulis, التصور المركب. So there is تصور. تصور in Usul is to perceive a certain question or a certain reality. تصور الواقع. That تصور cannot be a simple observation. That تصور has to be composite. That تركيب of the تصور, that composition of the تصور is part of the necessary fiqh of today. Fiqh in the wider sense, not necessarily for fatwa, but fiqh in the sense of understanding the reality and understanding history, as we mentioned in the previous 2 lectures. We could not understand history the way we discussed it without a composite approach to history. And you really cannot understand the reality of today, any reality at any level, without a composite approach to the reality. When you look at the reality, you have to look at the objectives of the reality. An organization, what are the objectives of the organization? A policy, a law, a street, a program, whatever it is that is in the reality, you have to look at the objective of that. A technology, a therapy for a human being, a certain, whatever it is of the human actions and the human individual or collective activities, you have to look at the objective of that, which is what are the aims of that activity. Now, that objective, how can you judge the aims, whether they are good or not, and whether you need to put other aims or not, based on the aims and the objectives of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So basically, when you have these cycles of reflection in the Quran and Sunnah, and you look at the objectives of the Quran and Sunnah, then you can start to judge the objectives in the reality. In the previous lecture, we discussed the World Bank Index of Development and the knowledge economy and these things. And these things states put as objectives, right? These are not true objectives, and these are not necessarily good objectives. How do you judge? Based on the objectives of the Quran and Sunnah. So if they are talking about justice or the rule of law, then justice has to be defined from an Islamic perspective. Because justice in Islam is a different definition. It's not a legal thing, and it's not UN Security Council based. It has a different meaning. If they are talking about human dignity, karam al-insaniya, in the Quran and Sunnah is defined differently. The human is defined differently. The society, the family, the charity, things are defined differently in Islam. And therefore objectives and then concepts. You also have to look at the concepts versus the concepts of the Quran and Sunnah. And these concepts will define your elements of study, what your conceptual framework of reality. Because I describe any reality, even this intellectual reality, using words, kalimat, asma. And these kalimat and asma, they have to have sultan. In here, إِلَّا أَسْمَاءٌ سَمَيْتُمُوهَا مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ بِهَا مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ. That sultan, that authority of the kalimat are for the Quranic concepts. So the Quran talks about very particular definitions, if you wish, of certain things, And these definitions cannot be hijacked by other definitions. There is a war on concepts that we have these days in Islam. The war on the concept of family, the concept of community, the concept of peace, the concept of terrorism, the concept of democracy, any of these concepts. There is a war on these concepts from an Islamic point of view, from the enemies of the Islamic point of view. Trying to redefine family for us, trying to redefine sin, redefine charity, redefine a mosque that is a house of worship in Islam. And that's a different concept from a church. These are two different concepts, because concepts turn into institutions. When you talk about a family, that's an institution of family. As zakat, as a concept, that's a whole institution. Al-ilm, knowledge and education, that is a whole institution in Islam. Al-waqf, as a concept, that is an institution, and so forth. So the concepts become institutions, or mu'assasat, ma'asasatul mafahim. And the concepts also turn into the third element here we talked about last time, which is al-fi'at, or the groups. Al-ilm defines al-ulama, al-hukm defines al-hukam, al-iman defines al-mu'minun, al-nifaq defines al-munafiqun, and so forth. The Quran ties the definition of the group or the fi'ah to the concept that is common with the fi'ah in the same root. And that is one of the beauty aspects of the Arabic language, that al-ilm is not separate from al-ulama. Alima ya'lamu al-ulama. Kataba yaktub kuttab. Qara'a al-qurra. Darasa al-mudarrisun. Al-darisun. Talaba al-ilm. Talabat al-ilm. Hakama al-hukam. Qada al-qudah. And therefore, istashara, mustasharun, shura, ahl shura. Al-iman al-mu'minun. Al-kufr al-kuffar. You cannot really separate al-ulama from al-ilm. Al-ilm in Islam is a very comprehensive concept. Al-ilm is not just fiqh. Fiqh is one part of ilm. Al-ilm is also language, and is also astronomy and mathematics and medicine. That's all in Islam. You could be a alim in Islam and you are a doctor. If your ilm achieves certain criteria according to the Quran, makes you fear Allah, makes you know Allah, you take that ilm from an Islamic perspective. So you are a medical doctor, but from an Islamic perspective. You are an alim of the iqtisad, or the economics, but from an Islamic perspective. You are an alim. You don't have to necessarily be a faqih who gives fatwa, who is also an alim. You could be an alim of the Arabic language, or other languages for that matter, but from an Islamic perspective. You see, we cannot separate al-hukm from al-hukam. You know, al-hukm in the Quran, وَإِذَا حَكَمْتُ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ أَن تَحْكُمُوا بِالْعَدْلِ, for example. So if somebody is going to be a hakim, whether a qadi or an amir in Islam, whether executive or somebody in the judgeship post, or any of that kind of hakim. In Islam, a hakim is not only a governor. A hakim could be a qadi, and could be a ruler, could be a governor, could be a king, could be anything. There is no particular definition of the hakim. But the hakim in Islam has to have certain traits because of al-hukm. Al-hukm has to be based on shura, and has to be based on adl, or justice, and it has to be based بما أنزل الله ومن لم يحكم بما أنزل الله فأولئك هم الكافرون فأولئك هم الظالمون فأولئك هم الفاسقون. If there is an injunction, an order, a command, an amr, and here is awamr, here the commands, they are tied to al-fi'at, tied to the groups, because the hakim has to do that hukum based on amrullah, based on the commands of Allah. And if he does a hukum in ma'siyatillah, against the command of Allah, then that hukum is invalid. If the ruler orders people to jump in the fire, as the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of Al-Hasan radiallahu anhu, Al-Hasan narrated the hadith without that part Long story, we will discuss that particular hadith, it's very interesting. But basically, لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. You know, الحكم بن عمرو الغفاري, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan appointed him to lead the army in the opening or the conquest of Khorasan. And he went there and they had victory in Khorasan. And they had lots of ghanaim, of spoils of war, gold and silver and so on, that they took from the princes of Khorasan after conquering Khorasan. Muawiyah sent to Al-Hakam through Ziyad ibn Abi. Ziyad, the son of Abu Sufyan, or the half-brother of Muawiyah, but his mother was not a wife of Abu Sufyan. So he was called Ziyad ibn Abi. And then Muawiyah changed that and called him Ziyad ibn Abi Sufyan, which is, you know, against, as our scholars here would know, against al-walad al-firashi wal-ahd al-hajr. Long story. But in any case, so Ziyad asked Al-Hakam to give the gold and silver to Muawiyah and then divide the rest. Not to divide the gold and silver on the soldiers. So Al-Hakam ibn Amr, he said, هذا كتاب أمير المؤمنين, this is the letter of Muawiyah, وهذا كتاب Allah, but it's Allah saying, giving me a different order. So I am a hakam, you know, I judge in this gold and silver, and Allah said that the gold and silver has to be divided over the soldiers, not back to Damascus. And it still goes back to Damascus until today, but anyway, long story. So he said, no, I can't send anything back.